25 episodes, one island. And by the time the credits roll on the season 1 finale, this show has handed you more open questions than most series ask across their entire run, and answered almost none of them on purpose. That's not a flaw. That's the whole design. And if you've watched any of my other videos on this channel, you know I mean that as a compliment. But I've never actually sat down and just counted, listed every single strange, unexplained, deliberately dangling thing this one season plants in your head and refuses to close. So that's what this video is. No answers, no theories dressed up as conclusions, just the questions, one after another, exactly as season 1 leaves them, because honestly, revisiting the sheer volume of mystery packed into these 25 episodes is half the fun of this show. If you're mid-watch right now, this is your safe space. Nothing here spoils anything past season 1. If you've finished the whole series, this is your reminder of just how much this show was juggling before it answered a single thing. Let's go through them. Number 1, what is the monster? Start with the big one because it's the very first mystery the show gives you, and it happens before the survivors have even finished collecting themselves from the crash. Something enormous moves through the jungle on the first night. You don't see it, you hear it, this grinding, mechanical roar that doesn't sound like any animal should sound. And you see what it does, trees ripped clean out of the ground, snapped like twigs, a swath of destruction with real physical weight behind it, and within hours, it's reached into the cockpit of the wrecked plane and killed the pilot, dragging him out and leaving the survivors with an unambiguous message: something out there is dangerous, and it is not shy about proving it. The camp starts calling it the monster, because nobody has a better word. Some think it's an animal. Some think it's something else entirely. Locke, tellingly, doesn't seem afraid of it at all. He talks about it, later in the season, in a tone that's almost reverent, describing something he glimpsed as beautiful rather than terrifying, which is its own unanswered question layered on top of the first one. What did Locke actually see? Why does it read as horror to some people and as something closer to wonder to him? The season gives you sound, wreckage, and a body. It never gives you a clear look at the thing itself. Number 2, why is there a polar bear? I made a whole separate video digging into where this one actually goes, so I won't spoil myself here, but if you're watching season 1 fresh, just sit with how genuinely insane this is for a minute. A polar bear, an Arctic apex predator, charging through a tropical jungle at a group of plane crash survivors who have to shoot it dead in the underbrush. It's such a strange, specific detail that for years it became the internet's go-to example of this show is just making it up as it goes, and season 1 does nothing to talk you out of that read. It just leaves the bear there, dead in the ferns, daring you to explain it. Number 3, what are the numbers? 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42. If you've seen this show, you already felt something reading those digits in order. That's how deep this one goes. They show up first as the sequence a survivor named Hurley used to win a massive lottery jackpot, a win he's become convinced is cursed, since everyone and everything connected to that money seems to fall apart afterward. Then they show up again, buried inside a distress signal that's been looping from somewhere on this island for 16 years, recorded by a woman who lost her entire science team out here decades ago. And then, this is the one that breaks people. They show up a third time, stamped directly into the metal surface of a sealed hatch buried in the jungle, a door that's apparently been sitting there since long before Hurley ever picked 6 numbers on a ticket. 3 completely separate appearances, no shared timeline, no explanation offered. Just a pattern precise enough that coincidence starts to feel like the wrong word, and open enough that nothing else fits either. Number 4, what's actually inside the hatch? Speaking of which, here's the mystery the entire back half of the season is built around, and the show holds it unopened for nearly the whole run. Locke finds it a heavy metal door built directly into the jungle floor, no visible hinge, no obvious way in. He becomes obsessed almost instantly, convinced the island wants him to open it specifically. The survivors spend episodes debating whether to leave it alone, and when they finally do blow it open, using dynamite scavenged from a wreck deep in the jungle, more on that wreck in a minute. The season ends on Jack and Locke standing at the edge of the opening, staring down into pure blackness. You don't see the bottom, the credits roll, that's it. An entire season spent building toward a door, and the door opens directly into the next unanswered question. Number 5, what is the Black Rock and how did it get there? Deep in the jungle, genuinely deep, miles from the coastline in any direction, the survivors stumble onto the wreck of an old wooden sailing ship. Not a plane, not modern wreckage. An actual sailing vessel, the kind that hasn't been in regular use for well over a century, sitting intact enough to explore, buried in dense jungle with no ocean anywhere nearby. There's no road it could have been dragged down, no river wide enough. It's just there, and possibly far from the water. It must have originally sailed on, like something picked it up and set it down in the middle of the trees. The survivors raid it for dynamite and move on. The show never stops to explain how a ship ends up parked in a rainforest. Number 6. How is Locke walking? This is the twist that made Walkabout one of the most talked about episodes of the entire series, and if you already know it, you know exactly why it belongs on this list. For most of the early episodes, Locke is this calm, capable, slightly unsettling presence, a skilled hunter and tracker who seems more at home on this island than anyone else. And then his flashback reveals something the show had been quietly hiding from you the entire time. Before the crash, John Locke could not walk. He was in a wheelchair and had been for years, and when he wakes up in the wreckage after Oceanic 815 goes down, his legs work again. No medical explanation, no hospital, no miracle surgery. He wiggles his toes on the beach in one of the show's most famous single images, and that's the entirety of the explanation you get. Something about this island either healed him or gave him something he never had, and Season 1 never tells you which or why him specifically. Number 7. Who is Danielle Rousseau, and what happened to her team? The survivors aren't the first people this island has broken. Deep in the jungle, they find a French woman who has been alone out here for 16 years, the same 16 years, not coincidentally, that her distress signal has been looping. She arrived as part of a science expedition, and by the time the oceanic survivors find her, she's the only one left. What happened to the rest of her team is left almost entirely to your imagination. She talks about sickness affecting some of them, in a way that raises more questions than it answers, and there's clearly something she witnessed or experienced that's shaped her into the wary, armed, deeply paranoid woman living alone in the jungle by the time the survivors meet her. 16 years is an enormous amount of time to survive completely alone anywhere, let alone here. What actually happened to her people is left as an open wound the show doesn't close in Season 1. Number 8. Who are the others, and what do they actually want? By the middle of the season, the survivors realize something they'd suspected but hadn't confirmed. They are not alone on this island. There are other people living here, people who were never on that plane, who know the jungle far better than any of the crash survivors do, and who are, unmistakably, watching them. The show reveals this slowly and unsettlingly. One of them, a man calling himself Ethan, actually infiltrates the beach camp for a while, pretending to be a fellow survivor well enough that nobody catches on until it's almost too late. And when he's exposed, it comes out that he was never on the flight manifest at all. He was never a passenger. He was already here. So who are these people? How long have they been on the island? What are they actually after? Because by the end of Season 1, they've made their priorities violently clear in one specific direction, and it isn't supplies or shelter. The season gives you fear and a few glimpses and absolutely no context for who's actually out there in the trees. Number 9. Why did they take Walt? This is the gut punch the finale ends on, and it's maybe the rawest unanswered question of the whole season. In the last episode, a group of survivors attempts to escape the island on a hand-built raft, the first real shot anyone's had at rescue. And in the middle of the ocean, at night, a boat appears out of nowhere. It belongs to the others. They destroy the raft, and they take Walt, the young son of one of the survivors, leaving the rest of the men stranded in open water. Why him? Out of every person on that beach, why does this specific child matter enough to risk an open water confrontation over? The season has been quietly hinting all along that there's something different about Walt. Strange occurrences seem to cluster around him in ways nobody comments on directly, but it never tells you what that difference actually is, or why the others specifically wanted the boy rather than anyone else on that raft. Number 10. What's going on with Walt specifically? This deserves its own entry, separate from the kidnapping itself, because the show plants an entire thread of strangeness around this kid that has nothing to do with the others directly. There's a moment involving a book he's reading, a comic, actually, where the exact thing he's reading about seems to show up in real life shortly after, which is the kind of coincidence that stops feeling like coincidence once you notice it happening more than once. Other characters occasionally react to him with a kind of wariness they can't quite explain, like they're picking up on something without being able to name it. Nothing is ever stated outright. It's all glances, timing, and things that are almost certainly not chance, and Season 1 leaves every bit of it hanging. Number 11. What did Locke actually see when he looked into the jungle that made him say it was beautiful? I mentioned this earlier, but it deserves its own moment because it's such a strange, specific line that it's easy to miss on a first watch. Most of the camp is terrified of whatever's out there in the trees. Locke describes an encounter with it, vague on details, in language you'd expect from someone describing a religious experience, not a near-death encounter with something, that killed the pilot on night 1. What did he see that nobody else seems to have seen the same way? Season 1 never lets you look through his eyes. Number 12. What happened to Claire during her disappearance? Early in the season, Claire, heavily pregnant, one of the most vulnerable people on the beach, is taken by Ethan and vanishes for a stretch of time before being found again. What exactly happened to her during that gap is left mostly undiscussed once she's rescued. She references pieces of it, disturbed, but the show is careful not to hand you the full picture. Given who took her and what we later learn the others seem to want, her missing time sits there as a loose thread the season never fully pulls. Number 13. What was Boone and Locke really chasing the day Boone died? If you've seen my video on Boone and Shannon, you know their story goes far deeper than this one moment, but even taken on its own, purely as a mystery, the circumstances of Boone's death raise a question the season never fully settles. He and Locke are deep in the jungle, chasing something connected to that same buried airplane wreck mentioned earlier when Boone falls and is fatally injured. Locke's account of what happened and how quickly he went for help doesn't entirely add up against what we're shown. There's a gap between the story Locke tells and the timeline the show lets you piece together yourself. Was it purely an accident? Was Locke's obsession with the island's supposed plan for him a factor in decisions that got someone killed? The season lets Locke carry visible guilt about it without ever confirming exactly what he has to feel guilty for. Number 14. Why does the island seem to reward some people and punish others? Zoom out across the season, and a pattern starts to form that nobody on screen ever names directly. Locke gets his legs back. Jack becomes the reluctant center the whole camp rallies around. Meanwhile, other survivors are met with nothing but escalating cruelty, danger, loss, death, seemingly at random. Is there a logic to who the island seems to favor and who it seems to grind down? Is favor even the right word, or is it simple coincidence dressed up by grieving, frightened people looking for meaning in chaos? The show never answers this directly in Season 1, but it plants the question early enough and repeats it often enough that it's hard not to start keeping score yourself by the finale. Number 15. Why does Jack keep seeing his dead father on the island? This one's easy to write off as grief and stress. Jack is, after all, a man who flew across the world specifically to bring his father's body home only to crash on the way back. But the show plants a specific, unsettling detail that resists the simple explanation. Jack sees his father alive, walking through the jungle, not in a dream, not in a clearly marked hallucination sequence, a vision or an apparition or something else entirely, glimpsed by a man of pure science who doesn't believe in any of this, and the show never definitively tells you whether Jack is cracking under pressure or actually seeing something real. There's an added wrinkle to sit with here too. His father's coffin, the one he was escorting home, is recovered from the wreckage completely empty, no body, no explanation for where it went. Two separate mysteries stacked on top of each other, a man seeing his dead father, and a coffin with nothing inside it, and the season lets you decide for yourself whether they're the same mystery or two entirely different ones. Number 16. What is the deal with the whispers? More than once in the season, characters wandering alone in the jungle hear voices, whispering indistinct, coming from no visible source, in trees that appear completely empty when they go looking. It's one of the show's quietest, creepiest running details because it's never treated as a big set-piece moment. It just happens briefly, and then the show moves on without comment, leaving you to wonder whether you actually heard what you think you heard. What's notable is who tends to hear them, and when it's rarely random, rarely a full crowd scene, usually one person, alone, at a moment when they're already vulnerable. That pattern is easy to miss on a first watch and impossible to unsee once you notice it. Number 17. Why did the plane break apart exactly where it did? Here's one that's easy to overlook because it hides in plain sight from episode 1. Oceanic 815 doesn't crash in one piece. It tears apart in the air, scattering survivors and wreckage across genuinely different parts of the island, some in the water, some deep in the jungle, some on the main beach. That's presented reasonably as an ordinary consequence of a mid-air breakup. But as the season goes on and the survivors start mapping out exactly where different pieces of debris ended up relative to the things they're discovering, the hatch, the black rock, the areas the others seem to control, the geography starts to feel less like random physics and more like a very specific, very convenient distribution. Nobody in the show stops to ask this question directly in season 1. It's the kind of thing you only notice once you start tracking the map for yourself. Number 18. What is actually powering this island? Step back from any single mystery for a second and ask the broader question underneath all of them: healing wounds, apparitions, a monster with real physical force, animals that shouldn't exist here, a signal that's been broadcasting for 16 years without a power source anyone's found. None of that runs on nothing. Something is generating all of this, some kind of underlying force or property the island has that none of the individual mysteries fully explain on their own. Season 1 never even gestures at an answer. It just keeps handing you more effects, one after another, daring you to notice that they might all share a single, still invisible cause. Number 19. And the big one to end on: is any of this connected? Because here's the thing that makes this list so much more unsettling than just a show has some loose ends. Almost none of these mysteries stay isolated. The numbers connect Hurley's past to Rousseau's transmission to the hatch itself. The others connect Ethan's infiltration to Walt's kidnapping to whatever they were watching the camp for in the first place. Locke's healed legs connect to his strange calm around the monster, which connects to language about the island that sounds almost intentional, almost aware. Jack's apparition connects to his empty coffin, which connects, maybe, to whatever unexplained force is generating everything else on this list. Season 1 keeps threading these separate mysteries into each other, just enough to make you feel, correctly, that there's a single, larger design sitting underneath all of it. Not 19 separate strange things, one island doing 19 strange things for reasons it hasn't told you yet, and that honestly is why this list works as well as it does as a piece of television. A show that hands you 19 completely unrelated mysteries just feels chaotic, a pile of loose threads with nothing underneath them. But a show that hands you 19 mysteries that keep almost touching each other, that keep implying a hidden logic without ever confirming it, does something much more addictive. It convinces you that patience will be rewarded. That somewhere behind all of this noise, someone actually knows what they're doing. Whether or not you think that promise gets fully kept by the end of the series is a much longer conversation. Genuinely, ask 10 devoted fans and you'll get 10 different, passionately argued answers. But in season 1 specifically, that promise is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's the reason people didn't just watch this show. They took notes. They built timelines. They stayed up arguing with friends and strangers about a door in the ground and a set of numbers on a lottery ticket because the show had convinced them, correctly, that none of it was random. There's a reason a list like this one is so much fun to make 20 years on, too. Most shows revisited 2 decades later feel dated in their mysteries, the questions age. The answers, if there were any, feel obvious in hindsight. The tricks show their seams. Go back through this list and notice how few of these actually feel small even now. A monster you never clearly see is still unsettling regardless of the decade you're watching in. A door that might lead anywhere is still a door that might lead anywhere. The specific effects change with television technology and audience taste, but the underlying instinct, plant something strange, refuse to rush the explanation, trust the audience to sit with not knowing, doesn't age at all. That's arguably the most impressive thing about this list, more than any single item on it. Nearly 2 decades after these episodes first aired, none of these 19 questions feel like relics. They still work exactly the way they were built to. If you're currently mid-watch, and some of these are already keeping you up at night, good, that's the show working exactly as intended, and I promise you, some of these get genuinely satisfying answers later. Others take longer than you'd expect. A couple of them fans still argue about to this day, but that's a conversation for a different, much more spoiler-heavy video. For now, which one of these 19 is eating at you the most? Tell me in the comments, spoiler-free, please, for the sake of everyone else reading down there with you. If you want the deeper dives, I've already got full videos on Jack, Kate, Locke, Sawyer, and the story behind Boone and Shannon, plus a full breakdown of the numbers specifically, and why the show structures every character around a hidden past. Go pull on whichever thread interests you most. And if you like this format, let me know. I've got a lot more of this island's questions still on the list. Subscribing genuinely helps a small channel like this one keep going. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the island.